What's up, everybody? Before we get into the defensive back preview, I just want to take a second. Thank every one of you for watching, subscribing, liking, commenting. I don't know how you feel, Gabe, but I did not expect this kind of reaction to it. Just want to thank everybody. Hit the like, but most importantly, I love hearing the different perspectives. If I say something I wasn't thinking about, or somebody just straight up disagrees, and hearing that stuff, that's cool. Gabe doesn't make a lot of sense of what he says, so it's cool hearing everybody argue with him. But seriously, please keep the comments for sure going. I like, one of the things I look forward to most when we're done is going back to the comments and see what people say. But the defensive back spot this year, not just that spot, any position, it's crazy, and it's a very unique situation where we have 13, 14 new guys brought in through the transfer portal and recruits. On top of what we still have returning here, we have some guys coming back from more significant injuries or health issues that are going to be back in the fold. As they get ready to start cutting down to the travel team, there's so many guys in the backfield. We don't have enough time to go through everybody. I mean, we could at some point. I could talk defensive backs literally all day long. I don't think anybody wants to hear a video that long. So I broke down kind of who I thought would be maybe the top half or so, maybe a little more, between starters, significant rotation players, guys who might step into starting roles. You're always going to have injuries, whether it's short-term, long-term. I made some notes sent to you. I know you've been looking things up, watching film, what little bit of film we can actually find on some of these guys, doing a little bit of research on your own. What's your initial reaction or thoughts, not just to the position itself, but bringing in that many new guys to a position that was really one of our strong points last year? Like, how do you see the defense overall changing, mainly hinging on this position?
I'm super excited, obviously. These CBs, these safeties, they look so good. Our nickel situation looks really good. We've got players returning, and I'm just really excited. I can't wait to see Tommy Hill play. We stole him out of Arizona State. He says that he originally wanted to come play for the Huskers first, but wasn't able to. COVID prevented him from even coming here and taking the trip to Nebraska. So he just kind of was choosing between Florida and ASU, and it's just exciting. I know you've heard him talk. He's so exciting, man. Like, he's got the best attitude, and he's so high on himself. He says he's the fastest player on the team. He's
really shy and quiet.
Exactly right. So shout out to Tommy Hill, man. If you see this and you want to come on, we would love to do just a Tommy Hill interview. All right. But no, I'm excited about Quentin Newsome. I see the pros in his future. Miles Farmer. I don't know, man. I love seeing, okay, this is silly, but I love seeing players with names like Farmer, when you're a Husker. It reminds me of all the way LSU always has those French last names. You know what I mean? It's like these guys were destined to play for their program. And I feel like if you have the name Farmer, you're destined to play for the Huskers. But Marquise Buford, it seems like that, he almost seems like the coach's favorite from what I can understand. So I'm really excited. My question that I think of the most when I'm looking at this group is, are we going to have a Husker defensive back group that actually gets turnovers on a consistent basis the way we used to?
Like we used to when, like Pelini defense used to?
That's what I'm thinking. Prince of Mukamara days.
I don't really know the difference in, as far as interceptions goes, between what the discrepancy would be. To look it up, I haven't looked into like numbers or anything. I'm more concerned with tackling. We keep hearing we have a lot of athletes in the backfield, and that's great if your guys can tackle. You know what I mean? You want your corners to be able to match up one-on-one with receivers of all types. Your possession receivers, your quick guys, things like that. You want your safeties to be able to do their thing over the top. When it comes to the nickel, a lot of people talk about how we run a nickel and things like that. A true nickel is an extra DB. And I know a lot of these outside linebackers are playing as DBs, but like you see, Jojo Doman goes to the pros and he's an outside linebacker. He's not a nickel player. He was good enough to do a good job playing the nickel. I would love to see a guy, I know we haven't brought up names or anything yet, but a guy like Wright or somebody like that could play that nickel spot, that's going to be a little bit more athletic, can play better in pass coverage, but still be able to come up and almost be like a safety as opposed to an outside linebacker on that edge or, in that slot, against that slot. especially with the added pass rushers we have. And, Shenander touched on, he liked the production as far as interceptions last year from the takeaway perspective. He wants to get more, ripping the ball out and getting turnovers off of fumbles and things like that. I agree. But you got to think, if you have athletic guys, so much of what you're doing schematically will help you get turnovers. So an example is like, if our pass rush is going to be as greatly improved as people are saying and hoping, that's going to translate to more turnovers. So I mean, even if maybe you fall off a little bit, if you're getting more pressure to quarterbacks, you can maintain what you had on interceptions, or maybe you can boost that up a little bit. Now, you say those guys are really athletic and can play the position well, it increases that much more. So I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation if these guys are as athletic and as talented as they're saying. Where teams hurt us running the ball, Wisconsin had one running back rush for over 230 on us last year. I'm more worried about stopping that. Than I am getting another turnover. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah, we lost a lot of games by one possession. And again, this team is drastically different than last year's team was. So I don't think it's safe to just assume that we're going to be within a possession automatically walking in because we were last year. I would argue if you keep that running back at or under 100 yards, you're taking 130 plus yards of offense off the field. I think that's going to do more for you as far as giving you more possessions than the one extra possession you would get had you gotten a fumble somewhere along the line. If you're going to say we can get a fumble per game extra, okay, I'll take that all day. But you still have to be able to stop the run. You still have to be able to stop when teams come up with like multiple sets on you throughout a game as far as RPOs and straight run, straight passing games where you can be more versatile without having to sub in packages as much. And I think you could get a lot more flexibility in that if you had more of a safety or a bigger cornerback type of a guy playing the nickel as opposed to an outside linebacker. And I could be completely wrong in my assumptions that these extra DBs are that much more athletic than the Giffords and guys like that who are playing the nickel. And that's not a knock on them, because obviously they're in there because they're more sure tacklers and they can manage the pass or the pass defense. But not to go off on a tangent, but to answer your question, I don't see, between the added pass rushers altering the scheme a little bit so that you can get your more talented guys on the field and the athleticism we have, I don't see any reason why we couldn't expect a high output of a combination of interceptions and fumble recoveries.
I hope so, man. And going off on tangents is fine. This is Big Red Rant after all. If we didn't get some rants from you, then people wouldn't be getting their money's worth. So we're losing Cam Taylor-Britt. We lost Cam Taylor-Britt to the pros, went to the Bengals. Deontay Williams with the Seahawks. Markel Dismuke, who I really liked, is gone. These three players combined for 143 tackles last season, 5 tackles for loss, 14 pass breakups, and 6 interceptions. That's not nothing.
Well, now if you add in JoJo Dolman's output, the tackles go
Seriously.
way up, the interceptions go up.
We might as well start with Quentin Newsome. Now, He's the only starting corner returning. What kind of ceiling do you see for him?
Based on what we saw from him last year, I don't know, man. It's tough. I don't like not having an answer, and always going, well, it depends on whatever, we'll see. But I mean, it's not like he had an entire season of being the guy, or not even the guy, but like even the number 2 guy or whatever else. I mean, a good chunk of it he did. I think a lot goes on between a guy's ears when a coach comes to you in the offseason and says, I want you to be the leader of not just this team or maybe this side of the ball, but this room. You know what I mean? So between him and Miles Farmer, where Frost has specifically named them as Frost came out and said that backfield is more talented than we've had in a long time, or maybe that we've had since they've been here. And the problem is, they don't know what they're going to get as far as leadership goes because they're so young. You don't have a lot of returning guys, things like that. But for coaches, Fisher has gone specifically. He was talking about Quentin Newsome, how he kind of holds him accountable for the other guys. Even for a coach to come and give you that responsibility, it might put some pressure on you. But you can see your name on a starting roster and be like, all right, man, I got the spot. It makes you feel good and does that. But when a coach goes above that and goes, I want you to lead the defense, or I want you to lead this position, I want you to take control of this room and bring these young guys up and keep everybody going together. That's, in my opinion, one of the biggest boost of confidence you can give a guy. He's shown he's talented and he can do his thing on the field. You do that, you let him come into the season basically knowing, and I know they keep saying we don't really have ones and twos and all that yet. In my opinion, that's a combination of coach speak, and also you don't really know what you have depth-wise yet. But I don't think there's any argument that those two are definitely going to be day one starters, unless they get hurt or really, have something crazy go on to where they're not able to perform. They're going to be solids all year long, number ones, right? And your mindset changes. You have that responsibility. You have the talent. You have that, I don't know what you would call it. You have that sense of, this is my thing. This is a sense of ownership. That's what I'm looking for. You have a sense of ownership, not just I'm working for a goal to get significant minutes, and then once you get that, I'm working for a goal of being a starter, and then it's like, okay, now I hope we win games. Like it goes above and beyond that. So I think the ceiling, especially as young as these guys are, I think Newsome's a sophomore, so I think he's on. They see something in him, obviously, to make him the leader or one of the main leaders of that room. That when you think a guy is that mature, he can handle it as a sophomore. Granted, he has a few years because of the COVID season and whatnot, that there's definitely talent there. So, I mean, if he can have consistency and he can just do his thing within the defense, I think he could be our next, corner to go pro. I don't know. I'm not saying after this year or anything like that. I mean, talent-wise, you go back and look at where these guys, the praise and the accolades they had coming out of high school or whatever the college they came from, most of these guys have the foundation that you see from a lot of guys that do end up going pro. I just hope as an entire unit, the defense is cohesive enough, because Shenander's proven that his system works. Look how good they were last year, as bad as our offense was, or, as unfortunate, I guess you could say, as our offense was in special teams and all that, to still hold things together and keep us in games. Yeah, it's pretty much for me across the board. The ceiling is whatever these guys want it to be. If they stay healthy and stay within themselves and do what they were brought here to do, they could be nasty, man. I think they could be really, really good.
Next up, let's go to Tommy Hill. 6 foot, 205. Like we said before, got him out of Arizona State. Guy was the number 12 ranked corner coming out of high school. He plays returner. Do you think he's going to be a returner on this team, or do we have that locked up?
Going off of nothing, other than what we saw, what little bit we saw in the spring game and what we've heard right now, and I don't think they're even practicing special teams yet. So there's not really anything to go off. Just gut instinct. I would say he's going to be our punt returner, and Palmer's going to be our kick returner, our primary returners at those two positions. I'm not really basing that off of anything except for what I've pieced together from what I've heard people say or talk about. So, it would just be a hunch, I guess.
That's fair. And he didn't start the spring game at cornerback, but that was because of an ankle injury. Do you think that affects him, or do you think he's going to be the second starting corner?
I think he will be. I feel like he will be. I don't know that him not starting that was because of the ankle injury, because he did return punts, even though it was pretty much fair catching or just catching it, and as soon as he got to contact, they blew a whistle. But listening to like Fisher and Shenander when they talk about other guys, other corners that would be in the mix, it seems like a lot of guys are still trying to learn the playbook, and it doesn't seem like he's necessarily having as much trouble with it. Or maybe he's on the same pace as them, he's just that more athletic or that much better. I don't know. But I would, if I had to bet, I would say him. But they just got back to where they're legit practicing, just got pads on, I think Friday. The fall ball just started. You'll start hearing, we won't know why, but as guys get dinged up or injured, or people are taking more snaps than previously or different things like that, going off of basically nothing other than what we've heard since they've arrived, I would guess he'll start opposite of Quentin Newsome day one, but I wouldn't put a ton of confidence into it.
What are your thoughts on Miles Farmer?
I think he's another one that's basically a guaranteed starter. He's right along with Quentin Newsome, he's the guy they're talking about for being a leader in that backfield, as well as the overall defense. Being a sophomore, being redshirted in his first year, then having the COVID season, he should be going into his senior year, and he's going into his sophomore year. So he doesn't have a lot of time with the team as far as playing and seeing him on the field, but he has a lot of time with the team. What we've seen, when we stepped in for Williams last year when Williams went down, did great. I think he had a pick against Ohio State, not getting blown up or, looking like teams are trying to go at him, things like that. It doesn't look like the game's bigger than him or too fast for him or anything like that. He talks about, still working on things, trying to get better. I really like hearing that from guys. It's like, I like confident guys, like you're saying with Tommy Hill. I love that. Don't get me wrong, but I really like when guys are, especially your guys that are your leaders, are like considered your studs or your kind of so-called star players, are still talking about how they want to, need to, and are trying to improve. And he talks about that, you know, in a lot of the interview things and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him getting, I mean, he got a brunt of snaps last year once Williams went down, but I think he'll be another solid guy in the backfield.
What's really exciting to me, man, is just like, normally you've got these sophomores that are a lot younger, and because of the COVID seasons, it's like we've got these guys that are still underclassmen, but their bodies have been growing up into their adult man bodies. So these, if everything had gone right for this kid, he'd already be in the pros if everything had gone right and he reached his ceiling, and he's still a sophomore. That's exciting for us.
Yeah.
It's really good for us, but do they go pro early because they're ready? That's the other question that brings.
That's tough to predict, man. I mean, you've got guys that had starting, and him and Newsome, you had guys that had starting roles last year, but it was because of injuries. It's hard to predict what kind of year they're going to have or what you should expect out of them, let alone if and when they're going pro. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. I'm just glad with the COVID year not counting against guys' eligibility. I mean, it creates full cupboards at a lot of positions, but exactly what you said, it lets guys not be forced to be pushed along or have that kind of wasted year that still counts against you, you know, and now all of a sudden you're looking at a junior or, you know, a senior in some situations with guys. And the building, the body's developing is 100% accurate, but especially at the safety position, the mental development, you know, the extra year and the extra time, especially when you're not playing and you're behind guys like vets that we've named that are gone now, to learn that, to absorb more of the playbook, to see film and learn from your mistakes, learn from other guys' mistakes, things like that. You can be a stud athlete, but if you don't have it all between the ears, or you can't recognize offensive sets and you don't pick up on quarterbacks' habits and things like that, when you solely rely on your athleticism, in my opinion, you're maybe half the player you could be. I mean, so much more can be compensated for when you can anticipate plays, and safety position is one of those positions where it's really, it really stands out.
It pays to have a man back there.
Yeah, and it really shows who understands the game and who's just reacting, who's anticipating plays because they're reading or they're knowing what's happening before the snap, and who's always reacting once the ball's snapped.
So our other starting safety more than likely is definitely going to be Marquise Buford. You agree?
I wouldn't say definitely, but I would say very confidently that's who it seems like it's going to be.
The coaches love this guy. Travis Fisher, you know, could not stop talking about him. He's 5'11", 190. Fisher's not worried about his height. He said, I've had smaller guys play the position. Mm-hmm. It's just about how big they play. What do you think, though? Are you worried at all about that? Do you feel like he's undersized? Do you think it's going to matter at all in the Big Ten?
No, I'm not. Well, I mean, if we had our whole backfield was, you know, like that, that might be a little cause for concern. But I mean, again, a guy that can understand what's happening, his athleticism, from what we're hearing, is crazy good. His effort is through the roof. He is kind of where it starts for me with a lot of these new guys that we haven't really seen yet, and we keep hearing how athletic they are. They're going to have to be able to tackle, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest things now that they're starting to practice in pads and things like that. Is you can be the most athletic guy in the world, you can lock down receivers and things like that, but when you're playing in the Big Ten, you got to be able to tackle. You got to be able to open field tackle. You can't have running backs, you know, like I talked about with Wisconsin, how they were gouging us for 200 plus by one guy last year. You have to have guys that can stop that. If he's back there and he's super athletic, and when, you know, slot guys get loose and he picks them up, or they go 4 or 5 wide and he has to play man and he can lock a guy down, that's going to be great. But when we're playing a team that's predominantly running on us and everything is short passes to running backs and tight ends, if he can't get guys on the ground, all that athleticism kind of goes out the window, because thankfully we have guys, hopefully, that are going to be able to step up and tackle. I hope we don't get into a position where it's either or. You know what I mean? Like, you look at our nickel is predominantly played by a traditional outside linebacker, and our defensive ends are other outside linebackers that have converted, or kind of vice versa. And he talks about Fisher and Shenander a little bit, but they talk about these guys that can play multiple positions in modern day football, and that goes for your skill set. You know, I mean, you can play DB you can play corner and safety because you're really good at covering, but if you can't tackle, especially open field tackle, now you're a liability against the run game, and vice versa. You know, we can put more outside linebackers transition to corner, or, you know, slot or nickel guys, but if they're getting blown up every time a speedy guy comes off the backfield, now he's a liability in pass defense, but he's a good tackler. So like I hope with all of these guys, we have guys that are sound defensive backs. They can cover when they need to cover, they can tackle in the open field, they can come up into gaps and stop, you know, decent run plays from becoming big run plays.
Now at nickel, we've got Isaac Gifford, Chris Kolarovic. I feel like he's played a lot, and I feel like he's gotten the experience that is going to earn him some playing time. Omar Brown, we're thinking, is going to be the third, cover corner. Other than them, is there anyone that you feel deserves being talked about? I mean, they all deserve being talked about, but like you said, it'd be a 4-hour video if we talked about everyone. I'm excited because I'm a size queen about Javen Wright at 6'5". You know what that could mean at some point, but what do you think? Anyone else that you feel needs to be talked about?
I mean, Omar Brown, from the sounds of it, seems like they've been using him more and letting him get more minutes at safety. Javen Wright, man, I'm kind of happy for him. You know, I mean, he had, I think it was like blood clots, stuff that's kept him out for a while. I would love for a guy like that to pan out as like a nickel. You know, I think they're going to start it off with Gifford. Gifford showed, you know, especially when Dolman went down, that he could handle it. What I look for is probably a little different than what maybe Shenander and them are looking for. You know, I kind of have my thoughts on what a nickel should do or be and different things like that. So, I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say who's going to do what, the way they're kind of changing up the 3-4 to the 4-3, how much they're still going to use nickel, if they're going to go more traditional nickel, things like that. I hope Javen Wright can kind of explode this year, you know, come in, be healthy, stay healthy, do his thing, be a big bodied guy in the backfield that's, you know, hopefully he's good, hard hitting type of deal. Noah Gates has been here a while doing his thing on a lot of special teams and getting in on games, things like that. Jalen Gould, I don't know if they'll play him, you know, if they'll play him against the South Alabamas and stuff like that and then redshirt him. And there's a lot of hype. He was like our kind of prized possession in the recruits, you know, of what would we get, 6 of them or something like that, 5. But as crowded as that backfield is, I don't know how much they'll use him. If he lives up to kind of what it looked like we were getting when we recruited him, maybe he starts finding some time in the rotation. There's so many guys, man. And they talked about like Buford as a corner safety hybrid, and then he was like, I haven't taken any snaps at corner, I'm just playing safety. And now it seems like he's going to be the next starting safety. And Omar Brown, I don't know how true it is or whatever, sounds like he's taking snaps at safety. So some of these guys we have slotted in some of these positions leading up to camp could be drastically different by the time they go to Ireland. So it'll be, you know me, man, I geek out on defense. I really geek out on the DB. So like I'll be watching it consistently. They're doing the new practice setup where they practice 3 days in a row and then have a day off and then they get back to it. So hopefully we get a steady dose of interviews from these coaches post practices, kind of updating on if guys are pulling away from the pack, playing, you know, getting reps at a different position, things like that. It's really hard with so many new faces to have a lot of confidence in who's going to be where doing what, but it just seems like odds, you know what I mean? You just take the odds of, you've got that many guys that come in that were at one point, whether it was out of high school or from whatever school they came from, pretty high accolades and looked at by multiple D1 schools, FCS schools, and you've got that back there.
Somebody's got to pan out.
So you would think, man, you would think somebody is gonna,
all this talent.
I think you're gonna get a handful of guys out of all of that, at least a handful of guys out of all that, that's gonna be able to step in. And again, like we said, with other positions, with the new systems, the new coaches, the new players, all that, it might take a while for everything to gel, but it shouldn't take long to see what guys, you know, guys jump off the screen at you and you're like, oh, that dude's a stud. You know what I mean? And it's like, I hope to see that, especially from that secondary early on. And then, you know, as the defense as a whole gels, I think we could have another really, really good season on the defensive side of the ball, potentially better than last year.
It's super exciting, man. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Leave us a comment. Did we miss anybody? Is there anyone that you think is going to start over the people we think are going to start? We forgot even to bring up Javier Morton or Braxton Clark, but as things start to shake out and we figure out who's really going to be playing where, we'll probably revisit some positions and go over who's playing what. But thank you once again for hanging out with us. Hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And most of all, go Skurs.